Hello, my name is Kim Wahnke, and welcome to my presentation for the Visualizing Peace project. So I'm going to talk about how storytelling can help us bridge the gap between different dimensions of peace. So first, I'd love to share a part of my general learning journey this semester that really stuck out to me. So I kind of started the semester with quite a pessimistic outlook and with the question in mind of what an individual actually do in terms of being a peace builder on a small scale and how that can impact bigger scales. So I found a lot of positivity and motivation in different dimensions of peace being embedded within each other, as well as in the idea that they are interconnected, so that doing a small impact actually does impact the larger picture. It's just not as visible. This is quite similar to what Atelier often advances as the interconnection between inner and outer peace. I both was very interested in seeing how different dimensions intersect and how small scale and interpersonal projects can transfer back to bigger scales and impact them. I found that not only different methods of reflection and dialogue can help us bridge these gaps, but that storytelling definitely has a potential in advancing peace in this way. So a model I found quite helpful in this is the socio-ecological model. Now, this model has been mostly used to explain the role of individuals facilitating violence on the societal level, as well as society influencing individuals to perpetrate violence. So kind of this intersection of the individual, the relationship, and the community and the society in facilitating violence on different scales. But I believe it can similarly be used in a positive way. So kind of showing the same kind of perpetration and the same kind of connection between different layers, but to propagate peace instead of violence. So using the model advanced by Derlick and Krug, who use the individual relationship community society model. And the dimension of it that I find quite helpful for this visualization is that it portrays embeddedness, namely that a change in one of the circles can impact the circle as a whole. And this for me directly links to the empowering idea of agency for the individual. And that even if change on the large scale is not immediately visible, the foundation for change has been laid in a circle. And the circle then forms part of the greater whole. And finally, I think that the model has great potential to show interactions between different levels. For me, I go even a step further. So when I personally think about peace, I like to go further and imagine the lines as blurry or as porous between the different levels, so that you can really see the interaction or the potential for exchange and for different influences to happen. So now for this personal story example, I will be using fairy tales for this example of storytelling since it's my research focus, but I found a lot of intersection within disciplines like psychology, international relations, sustainable development, peace education, and gender studies with the form of storytelling that I've been looking at, fairy tales. And for this, I found it quite interesting to see how most of these disciplines connect to fairy tales as a mode of storytelling in that they appeal to one tier of like the just shown model of peace. So either to individual or to the societal level. And I found it quite interesting to see how not only the tiers, but also the disciplines could be connected and seen as more dynamic between each other in terms of looking at storytelling. And I've also been interested in seeing how storytelling can not only be used as a tool for personal peace, since it's often viewed as more individual or to bring peace to individual or small scale peace, but how it can also introduce peace into relationship, communities, or even to society as a whole. So the first level of the model, it refers to the personal, so the individual level. And here I wanted to look at how peace storytelling can help shape individuals into more peaceful people and eventually into peace builders. So kind of looking at the inner peace aspect of this. So here fairy tales as a mode of storytelling teach children or adults about their emotions. They often talk about universal fears that most children can relate to, like the fear of parental abandonment, and then helps them to overcome them. These narratives, through the often therapeutic function, can help people better understand themselves and also regulate their emotions, which can lay the groundwork for the cultivation of inner peace in later stages of life. So The next dimension is the relationship dimension, and this looks at the social interactions a person has. So focusing on their social circle, their partners, their family members, and their friends, and how these people interact with each other. On a piece level, we can see that different modes of storytelling can teach a lot about basic ethical and moral behavior between people. These forms of storytelling, here fairy tales, produce models for interaction with the people close to us, and this can help us with cultivating a peaceful environment on the small scale. Fairy tales specifically can help with understanding small-scale conflict, for example, sibling rivalries, and the following efforts of peacemaking on a very small scale. Next, we have the community stage, and this talks about settings like schools, workplaces, or neighborhoods. And not only do all these things function and our existence within forms of storytelling, but storytelling fundamentally shows us the accepted behaviors and values within these contexts. And in fairy tales specifically, basic culturally specific understandings of ethical and moral standards are transmitted. A lot of what community cohesion is founded on basic ethical and moral understandings. So they are very, very fundamental to making peace within our communities. And I found that putting more emphasis on teaching peace within these modes of storytelling and truly understanding that a lot of the values they transmit are fundamental to our community peace building can go a long way in influencing moral standards on a community level. So now, finally, the last tier of the model is the societal level. And this includes the overall climate within the society, including the social norms towards a specific topic, as well as attitudes of the general population and their behaviors. And not only are forms of storytelling often a mass narration tool, which impacts people from across entire societies across the globe, but as Moskalenko describes, they can also be a tool in mass psychology. So according to her, she focuses on fairy tales. Fairy tales often shape our behavior in high-stakes situations and can therefore be used to model societal behavior in, for example, conflict situations. And I think it could be very interesting to use her research and see what the same kind of narratives can do for situations of peace building and or keeping. So now, finally, I would like to address some issues or gaps that I've seen when looking at storytelling, and specifically fairy tales through this model. So firstly, I'd like to advance. I'm not advocating for using this exact model for looking at the different tiers of peace and how they can be impacted through one specific way of action, like here, storytelling through fairy tales. This is because I'm aware of the limitations of the model, specifically through it being something that actually belongs to a different discipline. But I thought it was a very interesting visualization exercise, one that I've personally found quite persuasive and quite interesting and quite optimistic. But what I've already mentioned is that the model has a few shortcomings. So for me, it shows a bit of a lack regarding the different tiers influencing each other and not only being embedded within each other. And this then kind of was also reflected within the disciplines in terms of a discipline connecting to fairy tales and peace, then belonging to only one tier of the model, which they connect to, instead of the model in general or the interconnection between different tiers of it. The outlier in this was psychology. Here I found it very interesting that publications stretched from looking at individual therapeutic benefits of fairy tales all the way to the influence within the mass psychology of conflict and violence on a societal level. The issue with this is that although it transcends disciplines and it also transcends the tiers of the model of peace, is that most content has not been explicitly branded as peace, but instead has been looked at as fairy tales, psychology, and either therapy when looking at individual models or mass psychology in conflict and violence, but never in peace when looking at societal models. I think that using the actual word for peace and harnessing the great thought generated in these intersecting fields could have great impact, especially for advancing fairy tales as a mode of storytelling in peace studies and peace education. And lastly, I think this model works great to show the power of storytelling, but it's important to recognize that this extends beyond the narrations about peace. In the case of fairy tales specifically, they have the same kind of power in regards to contents of them that have often been criticized, including gender roles, social injustice, or the division of people into in-groups and out-groups within the fairy tale. So while this model can be helpful for looking at how storytelling portrays peace, it also has the same effects for all kind of other topics discussed within the tale. Yeah, so that was my presentation, and here's my bibliography if you'd like to have a further look. Thank you very much for listening, and that's it for me.